Hello friends, I hope you all doing very well. Friends, the supplier play an important role for the GxP computerized system. What should have a supplier when we are going for the computerized system? Today we will discuss that. Supplier activities in GxP computerized system. Friends, this is Hema Sharma and I'm here with you for review the supplier activities as described in the regulatory requirement. This video is referred from the GAMP 5 second edition. Please watch till end and the key point for the supplier is described here. Friends, all phases of the computerized system life cycle require cooperation between the regulated company and external and internal supplier. We all know it very well, including IT, engineering, and all. Both regulatory companies and supplier have important role to play in ensuring that suitable computerized systems are deployed as a part of regulatory activities. The supplier is important. The activities of supplier is important because ultimately the knowledge of the supplier, the activities of supplier going to impact on your compliance system of GxP computerized system. The competence and reliability of the service provider must be ensured. Even though regulated companies cannot delegate their regulatory accountability to the supplier, they may leverage the knowledge, experience, activities, and artifact of IT or IS service provider through risk-based assessment, management, and governance process. Yes, overall responsibility is regulatory company. Regulatory company are responsible for compliance of GxP activity. But the support from the supplier is important. The capabilities, the knowledge, and the experience that supplier have give the support to regulatory company to ensure the compliance, ensure the data integrity requirement, ensure the quality and safety of the patient. Regulatory company should ensure that most common mechanism for this is supplier assessment, which may include an audit depending on the risk, complexity, and novelty. If you remember, in initial risk assessment, we check that there is requirement of vendor audit or not. So at that time, we ensure that what is the risk behind to select the supplier. That's why this is written in guideline. The regulatory company should ensure that the most common mechanism for this is supplier assessment, which may include an audit depending on the risk, complexity, and novelty. Right? The regulatory expectation is that systems are fit for intended use and maintained in the state of control and compliance. This is the key 4 points that is written in the GAMP 5, and we easily understand that all the phases of computer life cycle, we need the support from the supplier. And definitely, if the supplier had a good knowledge and compliance level, we can develop our confidence in the next level of our expectation, and we achieve the compliance state of our GxP system. If you remember, in the European guideline, this is written about the supplier and service provider. There is 4 points. First, when third party supplier service provider use, whenever we use, like for provide, install, configure, integrate, validate and maintain, modify or retain the computerized system or related service, or for data processing, formal agreement must be existed between the manufacturer and any third party. And these agreements should include clearly statement of responsible of the third party. IT department should be considered analog. This is the line we should remember all from the EU. Second one, the competence and reliability of the supplier are key factor. When selecting a product or the service provider, the need for an audit should be based upon the risk assessment that we already understand in our initial risk assessment. What is the need? What extent we have to select our supplier? What is our confidence level? If you remember that, we have already one video on that vendor audit, vendor selection. You can see that, and I have attached the link in below description, right? Third point, documentation supplied with commercial of the self product should be reviewed by regulated user to check that user requirement and fulfill of the self product, means the category 3 product, especially for the lab. So that for that consent, this is written that documentation supplied with the commercial of the self product should be reviewed by regulator user to check their user requirement are fulfilled. Whatever your URS, what you decided for your software for the this category third of the self product, so that should be available from the vendor side. Third one, quality system and audit information relating to the supplier or developer of the software and implemented system should be made available for inspector on request. Means quality system and audit information related to supplier, means whatever audit you did, whatever the checklist you have, what is the approach you have, should be available at the time of the audit. So this 4 point from the EU. Now just see, we understand as a regulatory companies, yeah, supplier have this, but what should have supplier? Just see that this is primary responsibility of regulatory company to ensure the compliance of GxP system, software and application. This is the key point, right? Second one, the role and involvement of the supplier is considerably important, right? We cannot deny the role of the supplier. Yeah, we have, as a regulatory company, we have all sole responsibility, but we cannot deny the activities related to supplier. That's why this videos I have taken here to understand what should be the supplier have. Third point, the documentation, assessment and knowledge of supplier may be used by regulatory companies for risk assessment and other validation and verification activity according to the complexity of the risk. Definitely, we can use all the documentation part on the basis of our risk assessment. We can use that document also that available with the supplier. Fourth point, the relationship between supplier and regulated company will vary significantly depend upon the product, application or scope of service being provided. Consultant, for instance, those acting as implementation partners should have sufficient education, training and experience to advise on the subject for which they are retained. So this is the 4 key point for the supplier activity. Let's see next one. So what is the good practice from the supplier? This is from the GAMP also. And this is, first of all, what written? Established QMS. Every supplier have their QMS system, their documentation system. They have the, what is the evidence they have. So this is written in 4 point in the GAMP, that provide a documented set of procedure and standard. Second one, ensure activity are performed by the suitably competent and trained staff. Third one, provide evidence of conformance with the defined procedure and standard. Fourth, enable and promote continual improvement, including adoption of the current software method, good practice, and appropriate tool and automation. So for the QMS part, as a from the supplier, we can see the QMS from with these 4 points. Second, establish requirement. So the supplier should ensure that clear requirements are defined or provided the regulated company. Don't say like this, if we are supplier, yeah, this is the requirement from the user and we have that. No, clearly understand what is the requirement from the user and then establish the requirement clearly and then act accordingly as supplier. Third one, quality planning. The supplier should define how their QMS will implement for a particular product, application or service. Yeah, you have established requirement. You have your QMS. Now, what is your planning? How you implement your QMS for the particular product that you decided or application or service. Fourth one, assessment of sub-supplier. If you have some sub-supplier, if you are supplier and you have some sub-supplier, supplier should formally assess their sub-supplier as a part of the process of selection and quality planning. Yeah, what is the process of selecting the sub-service or sub-supplier? So that part also include here in supplier good practice. Then produce specification. The supplier should specify the system to meet the defined requirement. Yes, if supplier have the requirement, how they produce the specification, what is the criteria of preparation of specification, that should have them. Perform design review. The design of the system should be formally reviewed against requirement, standard, identification risks to ensure that the system will meet its intended purpose and that adequate control are established to manage the risk. Okay, so what is the design? What is the requirement and how can they design according to risk-based approach? Okay, so whatever the risk to design like a requirement, how can they mitigate that? This should be the part of design review. 7. Software production configuration. Software should be developed in accordance with the defined standard, including the use of code review process. Configuration should follow any defined rule or recommendation and should be documentation. So what is the procedure to configure the requirement? Configure the software is defined upon the defined standard, including the use of code review process. So there should be the code review process also with the supplier. 8. Performing testing. Yeah, we have the code, we develop that, but supplier should test the system in accordance with the approved test plan and test specification. Whatever the specification prepared, whatever the test planning prepared, supplier should test that. Commercial release of the system. System release to customer should be performed in accordance with the formal process. This is not released into GxP environment, which is regulated company activity. Okay, GxP environment is not related to that. That is the responsibility of the regulated company. Now, provide user documentation and training. Supplier should provide adequate system management documentation, operational documentation, and training in accordance with the agreed contract. Training is important. If you prepare the software and nobody know about the actual follow or flow of the system, or you can say someone know, someone did not know. So the proper training and the training assessment is important here. Now, support and maintain the system in the operation. The supplier should support and maintain the system in accordance with the agreed contract. The process of managing and documenting system change should be fully described. Then system replacement and retirement. The supplier should manage the replacement or withdrawal of the product service in accordance with the documented process and plan. The supplier also may support the regulated company with the retirement of computerized system in accordance with the regulatory company procedure. So this is the 12 major point. This is written from the GAMP 5. This is not written by me. And somebody says that, somebody told me you are just say the what is written in the guideline. So I'm just say what is written in the guideline, and I want to be know that what you have the criteria, what is you have the service agreement in which these all the 12 requirements are written. So when you prepare any service agreement, that is also written in the FDA, in service agreement, this is clearly written that what is the responsibility of contract giver and what is the responsibility of the contract acceptor, and what is the criteria to overall life cycle of the computerized system, what is the responsibility of the supplier, and what is the responsibility as a regulated company. This should be clearly written, friends, on the document. Now, just see what is the GAMP category 3 product. So just see about the supplier responsibility for the category 3 product. So if the product is purchased off the shelf and does not require configuration to support business process, or only offer defined range of the factory provided value or range, supplier involvement with the regulatory company is typically limited to the provision of documentation, training, support, and maintenance. Okay, if you are going to be purchase category 3 product, remember that the involvement of supplier is going typically to documentation, training, and support and maintenance in overall life cycle of the computerized system. Then category 4 product. Yeah, of course. If the product require configuration to support a specific business process, Supplier involved with the regulated company will typically include support with the specification configuration, verification, and operation of the system. Procedure to follow should be agreed between the regulated company and the supplier and be documented in the appropriate plan. So the responsibility in this case going to be high with the supplier, and as a regulated company, our expectation from the supplier going to be high. So typically include support with the specification, configuration, verification, and operation of the system, especially in category 4. Now category 5 product is the custom application. The regulated company typically contract a supplier to develop the application based upon defined requirement. Therefore, the supplier will be involved during the full project life cycle of the system and also provide support during the system operation. What type of category you are going to implement? Accordingly, the responsibility of regulated company and supplier going to be next level of the regulatory expectation. Now, quality management system. Any supplier that we already check in number 1 step for establish QMS. So quality management system of the supplier approach to continual improvement, including the adoption of current software development model, method, good practice, and associate selection of supporting tool and automation. The QMS should be based on the life cycle concept of the development and subsequent support of the computerized system. So establish QMS system. What is the procedure of the change control? What is the procedure of updation? What type of the procedure you are going to be accept, like agile procedure, or you develop or upgrade or automate? In which tool you are going to be used to check the impact assessment, to check the RCA. That is the part is quality management system. And we already understand in 4 steps about the QMS of the supplier. Now, supplier quality planning. That is our quality planning. This one, third one, the quality planning. So what is the quality planning? Supplier should have defined how the QMS will implement it for the particular product, application, or service. Right? This should include defining the lifecycle model being followed and the project organization, activity, procedure, delivers, and responsibility for establish the fitness of intended use of the system. Okay, what is the planning? You have the QMS, we understand, but what is your planning? How you implement your QMS in the implementation of the software, right? The approach may include prototyping or other software development technique, right? A prototype or other development technique can be applied. The role of the supplier QA should be clearly defined. Really, this supplier quality requirement may be captured in a separate document and entitled quality plan or other supplier document. So you can say quality plan of the supplier. You can document it all the planning on that document as a supplier. In each case, the quality requirement should be clearly documented, reviewed, approved, assessed, and followed. So the role of the QA from the supplier side is important here, so that the documentation process can be reviewed properly and approved properly, and we can assess that. Right? Now requirement. We have the URS. Okay. So according to requirement, what is the role of the supplier? Requirement are captured, defined, and developed internally by the supplier. Okay. In the case of product development, or may be provided by the customer for a configured product, custom application or service. The requirement should define clearly and precise what is the system should be and state any constraint. Okay, it is precisely written down in the case of especially category 4 and category 5 product. Now, second one, requirement should be developed, reviewed, and approved in accordance with the development method implemented by the supplier, whether it will be linear or iterative. Okay, it is linear or iterative by the agile method. Depend upon that. So requirement should be developed and reviewed, and then approved according to the development method. What is the development method we are going to be implement? Right? Now, third, Change to requirement should be controlled. This is the part of the QMS also. Any requirement you are going to be changed should be controlled. Change to subsequent specification documents that affect the requirement should lead to an update of the requirement. Okay, you need the updation in any requirement. Now, fourth one, regulated company wish to maximize the use of supplier testing to support their compliance activity, right? Regulated company wish to maximize the use of supplier testing to support their compliance activity. This is the part of your CSA. Remember that. The regulated company wish to maximize the use of supplier testing to support their compliance activity. Therefore, requirements should be written such that they can be tested. Okay. Individual requirements should be traceable through the life cycle. All the individual requirements, all requirements should be traceable throughout the life cycle. Means your traceability matrix. Now, sixth one, the configured product and custom application. The regulated company should describe the business process to be automated. If you want to say configured product, category 4 product, and custom application, category 5 product, the regulated company should describe the business process to be automated. The process of business should be clearly defined. Okay. And 7.1, in the case of configured product, these processes should be aligned with the functionality of the product to be used. This may require significant process re-engineering. Okay. The use of appropriate and effective software tools should be considered by supplier to manage information, record that they may otherwise have been managed via paper documentation. So this is the 7 main point for related to requirement for the supplier. Yes, regulated company have the major role and supplier have the major role, and the combined understanding QMS approach and change management approach, development approach gives you the best compliance GxP system. Now, sub-supplier assessment. We understand in that supplier good practice. So the supplier should formally assess the sub-supplier part of the quality planning. Yeah, if you are going to be prepare your quality planning and you understand that as a supplier, you need some sub-supplier support also. So the quality planning should be assessed that. Okay. They also should have periodically reassess in accordance with the QMS. Your QMS should be clearly defined that revisit is required for the sub-supplier assessment also. Okay. And third one, the decision whether to perform an audit of their sub-supplier should be documented and based upon the risk assessment. Clearly defined. If you are going to be take the sub-supplier, there is requirement of the audit. There is the requirement of the risk assessment also. Now, fourth one, in some cases, such as those sub-supplier related to the location and hosting the GxP regulated data, sub-supplier management may have a direct impact upon the regulated company compliance and should be made transparent. So, whatever the sub-supplier activity going to be impact on the regulatory company. So, transparency is required here. So, clear transparency is required for compliance purpose. Okay, so this is the sub-supplier assessment. Now, prototyping. So, prototyping method may be used to quickly user requirement or to evaluate area of risk. We need the prototype. We need some testing. Yeah, we need some prototype, small thing that we can assess. Okay, this is requirement is going to be fulfilled or not, or there may some modification is required. Okay, so prototyping is important. Now, typically a prototype is used to evaluate the accessibility of the user interface, the performance of the critical algorithm, suitability of the overall solution, or aspect of the system performance such as capacity and the speed. Okay, so we can understand what is the capacity, what is the speed like. Okay, what is the suitability overall solution. Third one, to be effective, the aim and the objective of the prototype should be clearly defined and the prototype evaluate against these to ensure the objective are made. Ultimately, we want compliance. We want our business, and our business with the compliance is ultimately goal with the patient safety, quality and data integrity principle. So whatever the prototype we are developed, we can understand, oh, there is the impact or not impact on that criteria of patient safety, quality, safety, and data integrity perspective. Okay. Now, supplier should define how information gained can be incorporated into the product in a controlled manner. Prototype is often used as a part of agile software development where control is achieved through process such as agile. Okay, means daily scrum, like this is the part. And control the sprint backlog, use of tool and sprint review and retrospective. Means part. Give the first step, develop that, test that, and approve that. This is the agile process. And we can use that. And if you want to know about the agile project, you can see one of the agile method. You can see my one of the video on the agile method. Now specification. So we understand. Yeah, you give the URS. Now the part of supplier is to prepare the specification. So functional specification clearly and completely describe what is the product will do. Yeah, they should produce such that objective testing can be subsequently performed. Supplier made the functional specification according to your URS. Okay, then design specification should be based upon the functional specification and should be sufficient detail so that the product can be developed. Yeah, and specification may be covered by one or more document depending upon the complexity and risks of the product. Okay, and specification should be reviewed and proved with the traceability established between the related document. Okay, what is the traceability you decided? Accordingly, this should be reviewed and approved. They should be managed under the change control with the awareness that a change to one document may lead to the change being the required to other. If you are going to be change management system, impact assessment and all the documentation should be assessed properly and the change is applicable to that document also, that going to be impact. Okay, now testing. For the product development, the supplier should test the product in accordance with the approved test plan and test specification. The test specification, when executed, should demonstrate that all the requirement, functionality, and design have been met. Okay, so now this may involve one or many stages of testing. Okay, depending upon the nature of the product. For example, a simple product may only need one test specification, while a complex product may have module testing, integration testing, system testing. Test record for each stage should be reviewed and approved. So each stage test record you can approve. This all can be or should be write down properly, reviewed and approved in your VMP plan, how you are going to be testing your overall GxP system. Okay, if you have module, if you are going to step-by-step development, then accordingly you can write on the your VMP plan. Now, how can release the supplier for the commercial release? Okay, system release to customer should be performed in accordance with the formal process that describe the criteria of release, responsibility, record to be retained, and item to be released, including software, hardware, and documentation. How you are going to be released? Okay, what is the criteria of releasing the system? Okay, now clear policy and criteria should be established for the acceptability or otherwise of product release based upon the number and severity of non defects. Clear policy and clear criteria should be established, okay, on the base of number and severity of known defects. Now, release note defining fix, change, non-problem, and new features should accompany each release, including minor release and patches. This activity is particularly applicable to commercial available product and service. For the customer application, the regulatory company would typically accept the system following regulatory company procedure. Whatever the procedure of company should be followed at that particular case. Now, user documentation and training. Yes, the supplier should provide adequate system management documentation, operation documentation, and training for both maintenance and operation in accordance with the agreed contract. Whatever the contract you are giving, what is the admin rights, how can we maintain that, all the training related and effectiveness of training is important here. Now, system support and maintenance during operation. So the supplier should support and maintain the system according with the agreed contract. What is the contract you have? Formal procedure should be followed, typically covering areas such as operational change control, configuration management, patch management, documentation management, backup and restore, business continuity, disaster recovery, managing software product release, training of the supplier staff, incident management, and system maintenance. Okay. Now, system replacement and return. The supplier should manage the replacement or withdrawal of the product or service in accordance with the documented process and plan. Sufficient notice of the retirement of the system or version should be given to regulated companies to allow them to plan for their required activity. The supplier also may support the regulated company with the retirement of computerized system. Clear? So supplier should manage the replacement or withdrawal of the product or service in accordance with document process and plan. What is the plan? What is the process? Accordingly, we can replace. Okay. Now, sufficient notice of the retirement of system, version updation should be given to regulated company. And supplier also supports the regulated company to retirement the computerized system. So this is the criteria for the system replacement and retirement. So this is all about the supplier responsibility, and this is, friends, taken from the GAMP. Please check it. If still you have any query, you can write me on my mail ID. Maybe there is some confusion. Maybe in the short time this is not described properly. We can connect again accordingly. If anyone want to know anything more about this, you can write me on my mail ID. Definitely, my knowledge and your knowledge going to increase. So that's why I'm saying learn, share, and care for each other. So friends, we will come again with different topic of pharmaceutical quality system or pharmaceutical related topics. Please share this video to other person also, so that the knowledge can be increased. Their input come here, come in the comment, and we can learn more and more. Thank you, friends. Till then, take care yourself, being happy. Thank you so much.